Oh.
Right.
I'm gonna move my eye to the sit. You guys want to
Over here. Right, yeah.
to handle the, I'm just gonna take a seat until we're introduced.
Okay. Good.
You just tell me where you can get that.
We'll be here and then we can switch so I can get. So there after. Okay. One second.
I will share out the screen, right?
Don't mind me.
I believe so. If somebody, I think there's muted at the moment.
Good morning, everybody at home on Zoom. Does everybody have audio? Can you hear me? Yes, all right, great. Thanks very much for zooming in for our March 31st PTO General Board meeting. We're going to do something a little bit different today. Get started right off with a presentation from our community program here at Weston High School about an initiative for coffee cart program here, and we have a few young gentlemen here to present. We have Luke and Sean. Is there anybody else that will be joining the presentation?
Miss Tracy.
And Miss Tracy as well will be coming along to start off. So if everybody is okay with it, we could segue straight to your part of the program. All right, we're gonna hand over.
Come on up, Sean. Don't be shy. So as Luke mentioned, we actually have coffee that we made for you this morning. Go right up to the podium.
Sure.
You're gonna stand right next to Luke, okay? Go ahead. Please help yourselves. There's syrup and there's half and half and sugar. All right, Luke, take it away.
Good morning, my name is Luke Oligario. I'm a junior at Western High School and I'm 18 years old. My favorite subject at school is videography. My favorite teacher is Miss Teal. I like to work with Mr. Kake. I also get to work in the community with Miss Tracy at a job at Technosonic, where I engrave transducers with an engraving machine. I also work at preschool, where I read books to little kids. In my free time, I played basketball and baseball on the team with my friends. A few weeks ago, I played basketball on Mohegan Sun with my Western Unified team. My favorite thing to do when I'm not in school is to play video games and talk to my friends. I'm here to introduce you to the new business venture for the community class. It's called Community Coffee. I'm now going to introduce you to my friend, Sean.
Good job. Okay. Well, ten more time. Good morning, my name is Sean. And I'm a freshman at Western High School. My favorite is to do in school are film, math, and science. I also love to lift weights, to push-ups, and workouts, and functions without a bench. I would really want to start a hobby because I didn't pass the middle school. My favorite part of working out on a coffee cart is serving coffee to actual people. I am really excited to start this business with my friends in a movie class. Let me introduce you to this.
All right, good job.
Good job.
I'm just gonna hit the forward key for us. My name is Tracy Coolidge. I've been at Weston Public Schools for 13 years and I have the biggest secret in Weston. I have the best job here. I am the vocational instructor for Weston High School. My position has a lot of different components to it. I follow students' IEPs, create goals and objectives that are related and tailor-made to their likes and strengths. I take a very close look at their likes, their strengths, their weaknesses, and I find and or create jobs for them and teach them employability skills in the community. Over the years, I've done a lot of community building within Weston and our surrounding towns. We work at major corporations like Talk Tours in their mailroom, right? Right, Luke?
Yeah.
Have you been there?
Yeah,
You've been in the mailroom, that's in Wilton. We work at InSports in Trumbull, like Luke mentioned, in their maintenance department and also at their preschool. We work in Fairfield. Where do you work in Fairfield? At
Technosonic.
Technosonic, which is a company that actually makes transducers for ultrasound equipment. And Luke engraves all of those transducers for them. And he also paints them too, right?
Yeah.
Luke? We work most recently at Lily's Market, which I'm so happy to be back there. We worked there when it was Peter's. And we work at Carluzzi's Market doing stocking and in their dairy department. We've worked at farms. Basically, there's no job that we haven't done. Our most recent place of business is the granola bar, where we do all their product fulfillment for over 4 stores. And the students are busy. That's all I can say. We also do jobs within the school. So I have students who don't go out. So we do various projects such as making emergency kits for the superintendent and any other jobs that come up. We help at the athletic department and so on. So that's sort of who I am here at the school. And most days I won't be here. I'm usually out in the community. And today we're here to talk to you about our most recent venture. Sean, can you hit that forward key for me? Okay, so Miss Seal's community class, I missed that first slide. Miss Seal is our classroom teacher. She's been at the high school for 12 years and I've been with her for those 12 years. And through the years, we've done various small business ventures. We've had plant sale. That's where we made our first big pile of money in our plant sale. We were selling them out in the parking lot at Peter's Market. Can you hit that forward key forward? We've also done holiday gift bags. These are pictures of some of the gift bags that we've made over the years, and you've participated in that. Remember?
Yeah.
We have paint all over us, and we still have a lot. If anybody's interested, I'm more than happy to sell them to you. And then you can hit the forward button for me. And most recently, we've been selling homemade candles. We make them seasonal. Do you remember the flavor that we sold?
Pumpkin spice.
We sold pumpkin spice
and strawberry.
and strawberry shortcake. Can you hit the forward button, Sean? So most recently, Sean came to us from another district, and through reading through his file, we discovered that he helped to run a coffee cart at Wilton Middle School. So we had tried to do that before COVID, and it just didn't work out here. And thankfully, our principal, through meeting with Mrs. Ward, we were able to sort of forward this idea of doing a coffee cart. She's been 100% for it and integral in making this happen for us. She's spoken to the cafeteria, cleared the pathway for us, and we're very, very thankful. So this actually started happening probably back in October. But to get something like this off the ground has been slow going, but we've made it a process. And Luke and Sean can attest to it. Like, every week we're working on like another little piece of this business. And we didn't want it to just be like a Keurig on wheels. We really wanted to take it to the next level and do what we had to do to kind of make it a legitimate experience in business for our students. We actually conducted a formal survey, right?
Yeah.
And we found that 70% of our staff and teachers drink coffee. So with those numbers, we decided that we would go forward. Can you hit the next slide for me? Okay, and we've spent a lot of money. Right, Luke?
Yeah, lots.
$100 bills, all of them, no. Okay, so we have used a lot of our funds from our past businesses that we've made, and the principal has given us $250 from her fund to help us. Our equipment is not cheap. And I just have to say, like, everybody in the school has been extremely supportive of this business, including the main office, working with our finance department, trying to get a Venmo account. I mean, everybody has been so excited. And today when we wheeled our coffee through, what happened? Remember when we wheeled our coffee through this morning? What
Yeah.
happened? Did people stop?
No,
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
People stopped. Let's go to our next slide. Okay. So this is some of the equipment that we've bought. Luke, can you kind of mention some of the things that we've purchased?
we have a bean grinder,
Mhm.
we have the coffee maker right
That's
here.
the air pot. Mhm.
Now we got the syrup and the actual coffee machine right here.
Yep. We have more equipment. What else have we bought?
We've also bought a scale, coffee cups,
Mhm.
and coffee.
Well, we bought wall art to decorate our storefront. We're actually having like a small storefront, in the, I don't know, where is that?
The
gallery.
shop?
In the gallery. Yeah, and we're gonna have like creamers and sugars and all of that. Okay, let's forward that. So we decided, and this is just an aside, that we wanted to keep our coffee very local and support small businesses. We're also a small business. So we're partnering with Sound Coffee. That's sort of their logo, that is their logo. He is a local coffee roaster in Fairfield. So this is who did you meet the other day? Who came to
Jeff.
our class, right? So Jeff came to our class. This is Jeff right here. And I love their mission, right? Can you read their mission for me?
To provide our fellow coffee lovers with delicious fresh roasted coffee produced with care and love for the product, for planet and for the farmers and communities who grow it for us.
And so most recently, Jeff came to our class and he gave us a lesson on how coffee is grown, and he taught us how to work the coffee maker, which is it's not just like it's a big thing. It's like a Dunkin' Donuts coffee maker kind of situation. And there's Luke and Sean working those machines. And what I love about the partnership that we're having with Sound Coffee is that he is opening a brick and mortar in Bridgeport, and he is going to allow our students to come in and work there, which I love. It's like one hand feeds the other, and it's wonderful. I think also just to mention, this business is going to teach our students customer service skills, money handling skills, organizational skills. The students will be measuring the coffee, grinding the coffee, measuring the water. It's going to reinforce patience, waiting for the pots of coffee to be made. That's actually, it takes a little bit of time. We'll be ordering things. We'll be keeping an inventory sheet. I haven't figured that part out yet. It's going to come. We're going to be shopping for creamers and all of those things. So it's really sort of like a very well-rounded business that we're trying to start. So can you hit the forward button? So will you read that?
Will the Western PTO be willing to support the community cup?
So to date, we've spent well over $800 on supplies. Principal Ward, like I said, gave us $250 from her principal fund. So today we're asking for a grant for $500 or more, if you're feeling generous, in order to maintain our business. And we have samples of our coffee for you guys to enjoy. That's it.
Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions for Luke or me or Sean?
I have a question. Are we able to sample some coffee?
Yes, please. We made that this morning. We screwed up the first pot because it's almost like a science experiment. It's not like putting a Keurig in. It's a little different because it's this big giant machine. If you put in the wrong amount of water, it all comes out wrong. So when I say we're going to be working on measuring and weighing and all of that, every time we make a pot, that's going to happen. So enjoy.
Can I say something, Sean, right? Okay, so to Luke and Sean, you rocked it. You
Thank
did
you.
a fantastic job. I think I speak for everybody here. We are so proud to see what you're doing. This is a big deal. I messed up my coffee this morning. It is not easy at all. So I am very impressed. And Miss Tracy, I don't know your last name. I'm sorry.
Miss Collins.
Thank you, Luke. Miss. Okay. Thank you for what you're doing. I am so excited to try some coffee.
Help yourself.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll leave everything here. We'll come up. Nice to meet you all.
Really well.
Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you.
Good job.
Very good.
Oh, that's a good job too, bud.
So I'm sorry for those of you at home who can't sample a coffee, which we will be doing shortly. Really excited to have our crew here today, Luke, Sean, and Miss Tracy. Joad's actually getting a little bit of coffee right now, so she'll let us know. Well, thank you for zooming in again. Good to see everybody online. We're gonna try to keep the PTO pace going today, and we have a few things to vote on, so we'd like you all to please stay online. But before that, we're gonna switch over to Meg Ward, our principal, with some updates and news.
It disappeared.
I know, disappeared.
Is it,
Bear with us, people. Oh, here.
are they there?
Yeah,
Oh,
there's 9 on, but we're just
Oh,
trying to
okay.
figure out how to see everybody.
Okay, but they can see us
They could see
and
us.
hear
yeah.
us. Okay.
Well,
Yes, we're good. We can see and hear you.
hey, very good.
Thank you.
The sparrows. must
Although the
fly.
camera just got moved, so we can't see Megan anymore.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
While you're doing that, I'm just
Yes,
gonna
you
go.
can
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to pop in and give a few updates. I have to leave a little bit before 10. We have our math tri-state visit occurring this week. They started their visit on Wednesday. They were here all day yesterday, observing classes, meeting with parents, students, teachers, and we're getting some feedback from the Tri-State Consortium. And what they do is they come into schools. I think I've spoken about them before. They come into schools. We ask them to come, actually. We invite them based on a couple of essential questions that we create and look for feedback on. And our essential questions for this visit are around, how we are providing lasting and critical instruction to all learners in our math program. So we're excited. I'll be headed down to the intermediate school a little before 10, so we can get some feedback today from the tri-state team. We have our NEASC collaborative conference visit. It's the kind of first installment of our decennial NEASC visit. NEASC is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They provide our accreditation. So they will be here April 20th and 21st. So just a few days after we get back from break. So we are going to continue to explore what we're doing here at Weston High School and continue to receive feedback so we can make improvements and continue to grow our programs here. One of the ways that we are growing our programs is through Link Crew, which I think you've all heard me speak to here. It's an 8th to 9th grade transition program. We launched it with our staff yesterday at our faculty meeting, and we asked teachers to provide us some names of students who they would recommend to be leaders in this program. And essentially what we're looking for is around 40 juniors and seniors who would like to be Link leaders to support our 9th graders throughout their 9th grade year in our advisory program and through our 9th grade orientation, which we're planning to be about a 4-hour orientation prior to school starting. So we're very excited for that. Good things to come. We did a nice fun activity with staff to give them a taste of that involved balloons in the lobby and all that good stuff. So to give them a taste of some of the programming in Link Crew.
Hey, can I ask, can
Yeah.
you also do that for the sped guys, so the kids that are coming up into the community class, can they?
Everybody's gonna, all
so it's
all
all-
those who are rising.
Oh,
yes,
okay. so-
yeah,
okay.
And we'll make sure that it's inclusive of everybody,
Yeah,
for
of
sure.
course.
Yep. We'll take a look at advisory on that front
Yeah.
too, and make sure.
That's great.
Yep. Certainly at the orientation.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
This week, our student government is sponsoring Colored Clash. So those of you who are here saw some jugs on the front table with different teachers' names on them. They're also collecting coins, loose change, money that students are contributing. And those teachers on Wednesday, we have a special Color Clash advisory or like a pep rally. And those teachers, depending on who raises the most funds, will be getting a pie in the face. So we're excited for that event and other fun. I know.
I was like, we're getting
Okay, we're getting a pie in the face. So we're excited for that, and we have lots of other activities going on at that time too. just continuing to boost school spirit throughout the year and kind of keeping that trend going. We do have next Friday off. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And so our spring break essentially starts at 2:30 on Thursday, and then we're off on spring break, celebrating the Good Friday holiday and then continuing into April vacation. SAT for those, families of juniors. We know that the SAT did not go as smoothly as we had intended. In some classrooms, it went well. In some classrooms, we had some bumps. In some classes, it was a little bit more than a bump, and we had some delays in running that testing. One of the things I think I learned in that experience, we decided to test on the first day of the testing window. It worked with our schedule. I know some neighboring schools decided to do it on the second day of that testing window, thinking, okay, we'll let the state kind of get out some of their kinks on that first day. So it's definitely something that we are looking at for next year. We have also done a lot of learning since that time in terms of how Chromebooks interact with the testing browser and how our desktop computers, we had a number of students in our computer labs taking it, and depending on the lab that they were in, the labs had different relationships with that testing browser as well. So we learned a lot, and we apologize for that being at the expense of some students and their stress on that day. But we are working to remedy that and ensure that it never happens again. I think that what the students learned though in that moment was the idea of persistence, that we kind of just had to wait, take some deep breaths, and then everyone that needed to test that day did test. But we know that for some, it was more stressful than we had certainly intended that day to be. But definitely a lot of learning and future webinars for some of our staff members to take part in, so we can ensure that's not happen again. But the key to this is so different. If you have ninth graders taking the NWEA testing, they can do that testing on their personal devices. And we kind of have our school-based devices as backup sometimes when something doesn't work on a student's personal device. For the SAT test, they must use a school-based computer. And so with so many students having their personal devices, we don't necessarily have all of the Chromebooks, at our disposal. So we do collect them from other schools in the district. So our intention was to use our labs to remedy the number of Chromebooks that we needed. And we just had some issues in those labs, but again, working to remedy. So sorry about that. That's what I have today. Are there any questions?
Thank you. You know when the results are coming back?
The results are usually 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. And then students can log on to the portal. I can't remember if they get a notification or not. When I would imagine they do, when the results are available, but I think typically 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. How do they typically receive results? Is it through an audience, or is there some formal communication?
I
for
believe
people that have
College
got their-
Board communicates. I have to check with Meredith on that. Yes, my gap in the middle school last year has made me not remember with COVID. So I have to check with Meredith on how they receive them. But I know they get a notification and then they can log into the portal.
Okay.
And then there are different resources that are provided through that portal through College Board, whether it's Khan Academy and other resources for students to do some practice as well, depending on their score. So.
Well, you've got school climate, that was a good meeting.
Yes, thank
No,
you.
I don't know if you.
Yeah,
wanted to
yes.
mention tonight.
We have been meeting once a month now. We were meeting bi-weekly and we're now meeting once a month. And what we've done the last 2 times that we've met, this is our school climate committee meeting that is made up of parents, students, and teachers and administrators. We read an article about safety, environment, engagement, and we are really putting together some areas of need and then looking at the action steps to help support those areas of need that have been identified by parents and students and staff. So we're making progress. I asked permission from the team to kind of finish that document, add a couple of more concrete action steps. We're going to put that together for the climate team to review, and then we're really going to set our course and agenda in terms of climate for next year. So, okay.
Very good.
Thanks, JC.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Thank you,
Joanne and
Megan.
JC are there. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks so much,
Have a great
Megan.
weekend.
See you later.
Well, we have a couple of announcements, just basic announcements. Wanted to let everybody know that our next general board meeting is going to be on Friday, May the 12th. It had previously been on the schedule for the week prior. But now it's been changed to May 12th. It'll be here, same place, same time, same Zoom. Just on May the 12th. So please, if you've had it added to your personal calendars, please take a look and amend it. So we'll, May the 12th, our next general board meeting. It may seem a bit strange. We've had 2 meetings in March, one at the very beginning and one at the very end. That was basically due to the spring break schedule really impacting our ability to get everybody in for the meetings. But what we do have on the agenda for April is our long range planning meeting, which will be here on April the 18th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., where we could talk about plans for the future for the PTO, new initiatives, new ideas. So please do come to that meeting, share your thoughts, let us know what ideas you might have. Megan Ward will be joining us for that one as well, which would be great because we can kind of align how we help and all the initiatives through this year and what we can roll over into next year. So really excited for that long range planning meeting. The past week or two has been really busy. We had a great team of our PTO volunteers coming in. The SAT day during the week when we had all the irregular schedules, special programming for our 9th and 10th graders while the juniors took the SAT. Dozens and dozens of muffins, beautiful fresh fruit, juices were all brought in, led by our parent representatives, our PTO parent representatives for the class of 2025 and 2026. Just want to say thank you again, including our great volunteers, Sharon Farrar, Carrie Schaefer, Megan Burns, Beth Shore, Don Sung, Jocelyn Crow, and Kyle and Jawad Masters. It all looked really great. It was very welcome. As always, your students of Weston High School are always so polite and appreciative and always say, wait, is this free? How much is it? And you know, they're very gracious and it's a pleasure to come in and help out with these initiatives. I hope they all enjoyed their programming and the morning nosh provided. After that, I think we should move to some of the, and I may circle back to a few other things, but we have some business to conduct. We posted some amendments to the Weston High School Parent Teacher Organization bylaws. They're on our webpage. They've been passed through executive committee, and what we would like to do now is ask our general board, having had the opportunity to review them online, to make a vote. So can we have a motion to approve the bylaws? We have Jawad and JC, a second. All those in favor? All right, all right, motion approved. Thank you very much for zooming in for the business matters. Appreciate that and the vote. We're going to switch over to our treasurer, Mona Sharma. I'd like to invite you to present our financials.
Okay, Mona, I'm gonna pull
If you're
up
on
your
it.
documents.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jawad.
Here. This is not. There we go. Which one would you like first, the operating?
Can you please put the operating, Jawad, and the February tab, if you don't mind?
Oops. There we go. I love how this is like stuck right where I need to go. There we go. There we go.
February. Excellent. Thank you, Jawad.
Yes.
So for February, in our operating account, we received 5 cents in interest. And we also made payments to our accountant for our tax return of $165. And that left us with a balance of $6,084.66. Moving on to philanthropy. Perfect. Thank you, Jawad. We received amounts for our SAT course of $6,119. We also received amounts for Amazon Smiles of $38.51 and interest of 96 cents. In February, we made payments for our principal's discretionary fund of $1,000. And we also made payments of $69.70 for our class of 23 Valentine's Day senior special. And we'd also made our payment for the vinyl graphics for our philanthropy request of $1,939. That left us with a balance of $60,833 for the month. And after allocations, we had a balance of $44,129. That was the activity for February. Any questions? No. So with that, can I get a motion to approve our financials for February? I have Livia and a second from Casey. I think there'll be a poll.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just trying to hear. There you are. Oh. Do you guys see the poll? Oh no, I haven't launched it. So
No.
maybe because you can't launch it. Okay, let me just go back to Zoom. I need to stop sharing. Okay, I'm gonna launch it now. And that is financials. Here we go. Okay, I'm launching it.
JC is a first. And, oh, this is all. Sorry,
Yeah, I think it's
sorry,
all of us
sorry.
because they already.
Lost in the voting.
Okay.
Great.
Approval.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
I had a question
Yeah.
related to this is how, when do we put in like for what the stuff that I'm doing promotionally for the Western 5K Memorial Day? So we're gonna need budget for, like I advertised in the patch and other stuff. Is that, where does that come from? This, do we have to make a request or?
You incur the cost once agreed, you know, that what the spend will be just with the 5K team and
Right, okay,
with exec board, me and you would then just share your expense receipts with Mona, who is our treasurer. Does that sound right to you, Mona?
Yes, definitely. I don't have like a special budget per se for the Memorial Day. Okay, so as you incur costs, you can just email me directly and I will mail you a check.
cool. All right, thanks.
Of course.
Thank you for that. Actually, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, segue straight over right back to you, JC, for your updates and anything else you'd like to share today.
Yeah, so as you heard, the kids had a game at halftime at this Mohegan Sun. It's actually on YouTube, so it was very well attended, and it was in between. I think there was some championships going. I don't follow basketball, so being English, so but it was very well attended, and it was a fun time for all the boys, all the kids that were there, and their helpers. So I can share that link with you with all the pictures and the videos and stuff like that. So we can put that on the website if you'd
Great.
like.
Yeah.
And then as you heard, we're getting this coffee program off the ground. And what I want to do is when we get to the point that we're going to launch it, I'll see if I can get some publicity like with the Patch and some other local news organizations to try and promote this, because this is something that's happening more and more in, like, so Wilton's doing it, the YMCA in Wilton is now doing it. And it helps because it lets the kids have something to look forward to, because one of the biggest things is like employment in kids with special needs typically is like less than 8% once they finish high school. And so, you know, I'm now talking to a lot of parents who have left school and they're struggling to find opportunities for their kids. And so this is one of those things that, you know, hopefully as time progresses, it will become something big enough that it gives them the skills and the experience and exposure to be able to present themselves to get employment opportunities as they finish the high school programs. So those are the main things right now.
Just want to say, JC, the coffee is really good.
I'll tell her.
Really, really
Yeah.
good. And I'm sitting here thinking, and of course, you know, there's things that need to happen before then, but I was wondering if somehow we could incorporate the team with the coffee to help with our hospitality at our PTO meetings, because
Yeah, I'll ask them. Yeah. I definitely, that's a great
it's
idea.
really good. I mean,
would
that would be at
so
least a once a
great.
month opportunity to
Yeah.
provide services and
That'd be awesome.
have the program.
And I think the kids, the guys
in
would love,
place.
you know, they would love it.
Yeah.
And as we get more and more kids coming up from the middle school, next year, I think there's a few more coming into that class. It'd be great for them to get the exposure as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And coffee
Thank
really is good. I think it beats what we've been starting. I think I don't get the ratio of the beans to the water quite right. So, all righty. Well, I think it'd be a good time to connect with our parent reps. Who we got online? Do we have oh, sorry. Well, let's roll back to Livia. I know Livia is online. Do you have anything for us from communications?
Not really, Christine. We sent the newsletter this week, so the next one will go out actually after the break. So yeah, be on the lookout, because I'll ask for submission unfortunately during the week of the break. So if you can get them to me in some way, but maybe by the Sunday of that week, it will be great.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Liv. Thank you. And if everybody could try to look out for Liv's reminder email and get that information that you'd like to share to her as early as you can, that'd be great. It helps with the process of getting the newsletter out on time. So thank you. Thank you again, Liv. All right. Do we have Carly's online? Do you mind starting with the juniors?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So our juniors are so busy right now. You just heard about the SAT, and they're doing ACT, and they're getting emails about Camp College. So I think that they have a lot of stuff that I feel like they're feeling a little weighed down, and it's a stressful time for them. On the parent rep side, I feel like we are more looking forward to some other things that are more celebratory and fun and at the end of this road. But we are planning to do something, I believe, with the seniors, but we have to talk about that on the night of prom. Will be our next little like special that we do for them, and that's something that the SGA expressed that they wanted to do, and it's before the seniors go off to do their internship. So we're looking at that towards the end of the year, May 19th, and then we're getting ready for our biggest fundraiser of the year, which will be, and probably of our class career, which will be the signs, the senior signs. So I'm feeling a little bit wistful about that, but hopefully we will, we have a junior class parent who's going to design it for us, and we're getting all of that underway.
Thanks, Carly.
Thank you, Carly. I'm actually gonna jump back to the seniors, the senior class reps from the class of 2023. We have an update, just from them that I'll read on their behalf. Information for the junior and senior prom will be sent to all parents and students right after April break. We'll need volunteers to sell tickets for the last 2 weeks in April. Please keep an eye on your email and class Facebook pages for more details coming soon. Janet, Maggie, Maureen, and Jen. They're your class of 2023 parent reps, and this is going to apply to the juniors too. We are more than happy to pitch in as junior parents and help sell prom tickets. It's a fun activity in the school, which is a pretty easy volunteer job. So please look out for those emails. Consider coming in to help out with the sales of prom tickets. The PTO doesn't organize the prom. We just help sell the tickets. It's a volunteer thing. It's not a PTO run event. The school organizes it. The faculty advisors coordinate it, and it's great.
Is it digital?
Is the
Tickets, are they digital or are they only physical?
believe they're old fashioned.
Okay.
Online, cash or check.
Okay, all right.
There's a permission form that has to be signed, so there's a process of when we volunteer to do it, checking them off the list, making sure they've got their permission slip from their family, and payment, of course. So it's fun. It's fun. There's a lot of buzz in the building when the kids are coming through to buy their tickets. Okay, so Joelle, do you have an update for 2025?
Yes, thank you. So what Christine said earlier, we had the pleasure as class reps for 2025 to team up with class rep for 2026. And on behalf of the school that they've requested, provide the students with that morning snack on the SAT special programming day, and it was great. And it actually ended up being for all students in school. So the freshmen, the sophomore, and the juniors as they were taking breaks from their test. Our group is currently working on starting the whole organization of the finals care package. This year, we decided to split those initiatives. So the class of 2024, which is the current juniors, ran the midterm care packages, and the class of 2025, current sophomores, we're going to run the finals care package. So that's pretty much where we are right now. Okay, thank you.
All right, and we'll now switch over to the class of 2026. Anne, are you online? I don't have it in front of me. Good morning.
Morning. Yeah, as Jawad said, we worked on the SAT day snacks, and thanks to Dawn Sung, Beth Shore, and Jocelyn Crow for volunteering there. We're also working on a social for the freshman moms. It's not set in stone yet, but looks like we're going to have a morning coffee at the Old Mill Coffee Shop in Georgetown on April 28th from 7:30 in the morning to 8:30. Just stop by and grab a cup of coffee and say hi. So once we finalize that, we'll get the word out on that. Also, the freshman SGA reps are going to be selling ice cream at the Memorial Day Fair again this year. And Tammy Roberts is the rep that's going to be helping them out and leading the charge for that. We're very fortunate about that because she's very experienced with this, and she's already reached out to the fair chair to secure a spot, and she's calling the health department for a permit, which is great because she knows all about that. So that's about it.
Thanks, Anne. You just reminded me by mentioning Tammy. Just want to give everybody a heads up as well. Next week is Paraprofessional Appreciation Day, and Lisa Zahn, Tammy Roberts and Jawad Masters have been working very hard to create a little, I've been working on it
And
too.
Christine.
Working very hard to create a surprise of some care packages for the team here at Weston High School for our paraprofessionals. So looking forward to that, and also want to thank our team for putting it together. It's a very it's a fun and caring activity making these packages, and I'm looking forward to it. They look great. I've had a little preview, so it's
Where did you get the list from? Did you for the paraprofessionals?
Which one, sorry?
The list of all the.
Monica Zarba
Oh, Monica
provided the
Zarba, okay.
list. Mhm.
I just want to make sure because there's a ton over in the other group.
Yeah, it's a long list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, in their class.
I'm 99% sure we
Yeah.
have a full and accurate
Good.
list.
Well, Megan was also copied, which helped because
Okay.
then we had like double seal of
Yeah.
Monica, who knows, and then Megan.
Yeah.
But fair questions.
So again, thank you to our team. We've got so many PTO volunteers working so hard, doing a variety of projects at all times, behind the scenes. You don't all see what everybody's doing, but it's a lot of work. So thank you. Thank you to our volunteers for all your time and dedication to the PTO and to our students and faculty that we all support here with our endeavors. Quick shout out to the 5K team. They're working very, very hard, putting everything together, getting everything in place. We've had help from our chairs, Nancy Kerwan, John Agu, big helpers include Kristana, our past president, and JC, of course, who's here today, and yeah, I've been there too, and Casey Saucy. We've all been chipping in here and there. It's a lot of fun planning it. It's going to be a great race. We have a sleek, slick, wonderful new logo. Look out for that. Start checking out. We'll be promoting our Facebook pages and social media very soon. It's going to be a great race, a great day in Weston. We're really happy to be carrying on the Weston tradition of the Memorial Day weekend with our signature fundraising event, the Memorial Day 5K road race and fun run. So please get the word out too that it's happening. But if you'd like to help, we'll be continuing to reach out for people who want to sign up. I had a lot of fun doing it last year. I volunteered to help with the check-in. And it's just fun. It's a wonderful, fun vibe. If you're not into walking or running, you want to volunteer, that would be great. I don't run. My husband usually does the running. And I had so much fun just being there. It's a great thing to come out and support. So thanks again to the team who was working so hard. I'm sure all the work will pay off greatly. Memorial Day weekend. I think I've covered everything I want to go over. And we're just about, Andrew, you good to get going in a few minutes?
Sure.
Okay. And then we have, before that, Jawad, you're on the agenda for any updates and introduction as our VP. So I'm gonna hand over to you. Okay.
So we're so busy trying to plan the last general board meeting and the speaker that we're gonna have. So we have a couple of ideas, and that information will come out soon. I usually have the information a month before and I give it during these meetings, but we're still trying to nail what the best plan is for that last meeting. Have a little bit of reflection, a little bit of, what's happened this year and some other things. So that information will be on the lookout, will be on the newsletter when we have it. But for now, Dr. Andrew Chi will be our speaker today. He is a psychiatrist, a coach. He is a Weston High School student, sophomore, if I'm correct. Yes. And he's also our Board of Education liaison with the PTO. So he wears many hats, and he had expressed a few times his interest in sharing his knowledge with the parent body and with the audience in general that this meeting reaches. His presentation today is titled The Psychology and Neurology of Alert Consciousness, Flow States, and Meditation. So with no further ado, I am going to flip over to his presentation and you can start, Andrew.
I was just wondering, so,
Would you like
Would you like to be
to be
here?
up here?
yeah, is it gonna be displayed on that screen behind you?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. So
'Cause
let
if
me
that's the
just,
case, then
it's
perhaps it'll
probably
be better
easier
if
for
I
you. Mhm.
stood over there.
Okay. Um. Share.
Doing that lunch thing we did last week. Okay.
While we're just getting in position, I remembered I want to say a quick thank you to Stephanie Morris, who's our chairperson who looks after our ACT and SAT classes. She's the one who behind the scenes coordinates those with our teachers who put those programs on. Just thinking of all the people who are behind the scenes doing all the hard work at the PTO, and that's really appreciated. So if you didn't know before who puts those programs together, it's Stephanie Morris. And the SAT prep course obviously completed just before the SATs happen. There'll be some communications coming out soon about the opportunities for the ACT prep course. So. Do well.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll turn over to Andrew. Just giving you a moment to get in
Yeah.
position and sharing things that I'm remembering as we go along.
Does everybody see the presentation?
It's
Yes.
not on the screen behind us.
It's interesting. I don't know what's going on with the Zoom today because Zach was also struggling with this.
Yeah, I was too early.
Yeah, so give me a second. Bear with me, everybody, while Andrew gets ready, just a couple of seconds. I'm trying to do this in a way that I can also have Andrew, which I usually can do, overlaying the presentation so you can see him talk to some reason. I share my screen. Why is this not coming? Almost people, almost. I can't even share my screen. So here, everybody's seeing it, correct? Nobody's seeing it?
Well, we can't see here.
We
but-
can see it here, right?
Maybe while you're looking for that.
Is it
I'm
showing now? Yeah, go ahead.
No, but while we're waiting, I can start to hold up some books that are relevant to today's discussion.
Okay.
So, the first two books I'm holding up were written by Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He was the head of the Department of Psychology at the University of Chicago, and he was the main researcher who developed this concept in psychology known as flow, which is very useful in sports and other kinds of academic or athletic activities. Then back during the time of the Greeks and the Romans, in Europe and then over in Asia, there were practices of meditation.
Wait a second,
Yeah.
because they're not seeing you right now.
Oh, they're not
You're
seeing
not
either.
seeing
Oh.
him right now either, right?
We could see Andrew talking. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Why is it not showing in our back? Okay. That's
Yeah.
comfortable.
Okay, so
Well, you can
that's
You wanna see it?
yeah.
No, just tilt the camera.
Just tilt. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't want to touch it.
no, it's
Yeah,
okay.
I
The
got it.
top on. yeah.
Here,
Oh, okay, fine.
we gotcha. We got him. Okay, sorry, Andrew. I
Oh, no, it's
apologize,
fine.
but-
Yeah, so during the time of the Greeks and the Romans, there's a memory system they had created called the memory palace. I don't know if you can see that there. There are other memory systems.
Also, don't forget to bring money to put in the jug in the lobby. Remember, the teacher with the most money in the jar, we're gonna pie the face on Wednesday. Yeah!
Okay, money, don't forget the money. So anyways, over in Asia, there are also a number of memory systems that were created. But over in Europe in particular, memory systems were paired up with the practice of meditation. And I bring this up because there are certain types of meditation that we talk about here in the United States, but there's actually other more useful ways of using meditation, which I'll try to touch upon. Marcus Aurelius had used his time of meditation to really help to settle his mind while he was spending the last years of his life fighting out on the front lines around Vienna and Budapest against Germanic tribes and other tribes along his border. Now, that said, I also have a bunch of books here about hypnosis, because hypnosis is in a number of ways related to meditation. It's not the same thing. We're going to talk about similarities and differences. And hypnosis really has two main types of practice. One is self-hypnosis, and the other type is the type of hypnosis used in psychotherapy, but it should really only be used in certain circumstances by very, very highly trained and experienced psychologists, psychiatrists, and I'll get to that a bit later. So when I'm not advocating for everybody to just learn about hypnosis willy-nilly on themselves for self-use. And what I'm going to try to do is explain and expand our understanding of meditation and how that could be very useful for us in many ways, especially nowadays when we hear about artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing, and how that's going to be taking up all kinds of jobs that we humans used to be developing great expertise in. Okay, so my hope is that I can try to teach you guys something that's going to help us understand how we can use our brains and our minds a bit more efficiently.
I'm gonna pop up the presentation. And I hope that I can put you overlaying on the presentation, but if not, at least they will see the presentation. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, and this talk is a follow-up actually to the previous talk, because meditation, as we're starting to see in the previous talk and by one of the teachers here at school, is not just merely something that helps to calm us down. There are so many other modalities that meditation can be used for in our academic life or in professional life or at home or whatnot, especially during times when there's quite a bit of stress or there's a huge amount of information that we need to organize and memorize and utilize in our lives. And for that matter, well, she's trying to figure out how to get this working, which is okay.
3 years later.
These things happen. I was having trouble this morning too.
I honestly,
So
I still think people are not seeing it, correct?
We see it.
Oh, you see it? Okay, at least they see it there.
Okay.
We won't see it
Okay,
here, so
right,
I'll try to
but
make
you'll
do.
see it, but I'll.
Yeah, I'll try to make do.
Yeah.
And I'll just ask you to advance.
Perfect, I will do that,
Okay,
perfect.
as
We
necessary.
figured it out
Okay.
somehow.
So that said, okay. So you can go to the next. So my objective is to improve our understanding so we can improve our mental health, and also we can improve our well-being, improve how we perform in sports, or at least how our children perform in sports, to improve their academic capabilities and some other psychological aspects of their lives and our lives. Next. Now that said, do you guys also see me holding a skull right now? Okay, that's fine. So I'll do this for the benefit of the other people here. So when I was in medical school, there was a concept that our particular medical school taught called this biopsychosocial model, in which it talks about how we've got a body, but then inside the body we've got a brain, and the brain inside the brain there's a mind, and then outside of us then there's the social aspect of our lives. And it's important for us to take all these four aspects, the body, the brain, the mind, and then social aspects, and to make sure that they're stable and improving over time. But actually the only physicians who really actually ever possibly consider the biopsychosocial model for the most part in daily practice are psychiatrists, even though And even nowadays, very few of them do. But that was the model that I was taught. And then if we move on to the next slide. So we take that model, we've got in the upper right-hand corner a brain, and I'll pull up this brain here for everyone else here to see. Okay, so inside our human skull is a brain. And in the PowerPoint you guys are seeing, the pink part of the brain, that's the cerebellum. And the gray part above that is the cerebral cortex. And this cerebral cortex up here is really what makes our brains completely, well, so very different than other animals. Now, nested inside, oops, it dropped. Nested inside the cerebral cortex is something called the brainstem. The brainstem is the part of our brain. I'll show it on this side over here. This, you can let it stay there. This right here, which animals also have, and it's actually more developed in some ways than ours. They do have a bit of a cerebral cortex, depending upon what kind of species it is. But what makes the cerebral cortex so wonderful for us humans is while we have a serious lack of dexterity and speed and other physical abilities than animals, we have enormous computing power. And there are all kinds of other ways we can abstract and understand things about the world that they cannot. So this diagram shows the brain, and underneath the brain stem is connected to a spinal cord. And there are these incredibly long neurons, starting from over here, for instance, from the motor cortex, that will send a signal down, all the way down the brainstem, along the spinal cord, and then send a signal as it connects with an efferent neuron going out to our muscles, for instance, in that diagram. And that one long neuron, which can stretch all the way along our arm, okay, sends a signal and tells one of our muscles to flex in some sort of way. Now, the fascinating thing you guys might know about the nucleus, about muscle cells, is that the muscle cells themselves have more than one nucleus. Most cells in the human body have just one nucleus where the DNA is stored. But the muscle cells have hundreds of nuclei, just one muscle cell. The muscle cells are extremely long too, and they have hundreds of nuclei. Now, the reason why I mention that here is because the nucleus is important for helping our cells to create more proteins. So if you've got nuclei all along the muscle cell, if you've got little bits of muscle damage, and this happens even during regular exercise, we'll have little bits of damage to our muscle here and there, then the muscle cells can more quickly repair themselves if they have enough oxygenation and if they have enough amino acids, which they get from proteins. So that means the way we breathe and what we eat is actually very crucial for muscle repair. I bring this up too because actually the same thing pertains to neurons. Neurons get damaged, they have their issues, but there's only one nucleus. And some of these neurons are extremely long, as I was indicating. One can stretch from up here in the motor cortex down to the spinal cord, and then one stretches all the way along like this. And it takes a long time for neurons to get repaired. And in part, sleep is very helpful for allowing us to go through the repair process and develop more neurons for neurotransmitters that are required to stimulate a muscle to flex. Any questions here about any of that?
But that you're holding in your hand, that's what controls breathing, heart. I mean, it's autonomic responses. It doesn't let you.
Yeah.
Whereas those are higher functions, right?
Exactly. Good. Yes. Yeah. And the area in between them, like in this cove right over here, and part of this, that's called the subcortical part. So this is the cortex, and underneath the cortex is the subcortical part. So cortex kind of refers to covering of a seed. That's why it's called cortex. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So that's it. This next diagram shows, maybe you guys want you consider it here so you can see. What I'm trying to show is that.
Right, they're not seeing.
That's right. Right. So right. So some of
Why
the.
is this going?
Thank you. Maybe text.
Yeah, I'm gonna text him. Yes.
Or you could just email this to us and we can look it on our phones.
Okay, so what it's trying to show here is that a muscle bundle has multiple muscle cells within them, and they all pool, give us action. And you've got arterial blood and venous blood here. The arterial blood helps provide oxygen and and amino acids. But in the next slide, which I'm going to move down.
So red is coming from the heart, blue's going back in. That's the
Correct.
oxygenated.
Right, so the oxygenated red blood cells make the arterial blood look red.
Right.
Whereas when you have carbon dioxide that moves into the red blood cells, then they start to make the venous blood look blue.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to show here, and this is now far, far more, is that in addition to amino acids, there are multiple other sources of what people call energy. It's really, I think, a misuse of the term for our muscle cells. And the same is true actually for the neurons, but I think as people have an easier time understanding muscle cells. So the amino acids, the fatty acids, the glucose that we all eat, those are used in a sense to create energy. And then when we don't have enough sugar in our blood and we don't have enough then we produce something called ketones from the liver. And ketones are also an energy source.
Is that the whole keto
Keto, yeah.
With that, yeah, I'll get to that.
diet and culture?
Right, right. So when we're asleep, when we're fasting, then ketones are produced, and the ketones are used by the brain and other parts of our body, kind of as a source of energy. And oh, good, finally. Okay, it's okay. All right. Okay, now I can. Okay, so normally what happens is we eat a meal, we get all this sugar in our blood, which a lot of it's converted to glucose. That's a very simple form of sugar. For the glucose to be incorporated into a cell, I know there's actually a bunch of cells, but to be incorporated, it needs a hormone called insulin. The insulin helps the glucose enter, and then the glucose will either be stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscle cells, if the muscles are in a resting state, or if we're doing something athletic or we're thinking, then the glucose is converted to something called pyruvate. And this is important to point out because many people think of glucose as energy and they're burning off energy. Well, that's actually not what's really truly happening. But anyways, it's converted to pyruvates. And then from here, depending upon how our oxygenation is, two different ways of making something called ATP. I'm not listing it here. ATP is really the most crucial thing in muscles and neurons. Is if you're not breathing enough, okay, you have too much carbon dioxide in your blood, then your body cannot use, it doesn't have enough oxygen to do something called aerobic respiration in the mitochondria. And here's another problem that a lot of people have. When we talk about respiration in general, we're talking about the lungs and breathing in. But when we're talking about the cellular level, respiration is not about breathing. Respiration is about converting certain types of fat, for instance, substances like fatty acids or amino acids into ATP. So that said, we don't have enough oxygen. Instead of the mitochondria converting fatty acids and amino acids into ATP, which is then used to help the muscle cells to pull or to help us to think, to help our neurotransmitters to be released. Instead, we develop something called lactate. Lactate can be also used to create ATP through something called anaerobic respiration. Okay.
So that's like anaerobic threshold when you're, because I do Peloton and they have like aerobic, anaerobic, and when you go anaerobic, that's like the high zones where you've gone beyond your ability to flush out the lactate, right?
Right.
And it hurts.
Yeah.
Right. So most of us, we merely breathe automatically through our brainstem. And then when we do athletic exercise, our heart rate increases and our breathing rate increases, just according to how our exercise is. But if we train ourselves to breathe in certain ways, to increase the volume of our breathing before we start exercising and into certain aspects of our exercise, then we'll be able to have more aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration always provides us far more ATP than anaerobic respiration. So if you have a student athlete, say a tennis player or soccer player, whatever, it's actually important for them to learn how to breathe so that they're operating with far more aerobic respiration than anaerobic respiration. Okay. Also, if you want to convert more fatty acids, amino acids into ATP, then it's important to learn how to breathe far more. Now, I mentioned this too because when we last met and we were talking about, or I mentioned something about breathing. When we go into meditation or hypnosis, typically in the beginning is a time when we ask ourselves to relax and start taking really deep breaths. So what we do is we then start trying to control the brainstem, instead of letting the brainstem automatically set the rate for our breathing and the depth of our breathing. We start telling our brainstem, okay, let's have our lungs breathe maybe more slowly but deeper. Okay. And it's not also just controls of the brainstem, we are also physically getting our muscles to start acting in other ways. So if we train ourselves as we're going through the beginning of meditation or hypnosis, or when we're about to take an examination, all right, or about to start an athletic exercise, we will be able to have far more oxygen, because when we normally breathe, say we're sitting down, we're about to take an exam, we have very shallow breathing. We're not fully using our lungs. But if you train to become a public speaker, if you train in singing, or if you train in swimming or certain types of sports, your coaches or your teachers may teach you, you really have to learn how to use belly breathing to really increase the vital capacity of your breathing, fully use it. So therefore, if your student is taking SATs for many hours, it's better for them to learn how to breathe in a certain way. So that way they can use more aerobic respiration than anaerobic respiration. You really get far higher numbers of ATPs.
But that's also because you only have 45 minutes of glucose or glycogen in your muscles typically, but you have hours and hours and hours, days of energy fat. So that's why you typically want to be more in the aerobic versus the anaerobic.
Right, and then there's athletes who before competition, a couple days ahead time, they're going to eat a lot of pasta or certain carbohydrates, because they also want to load up the glycogen storage in their liver. So they have that also. So there's a number of things that we can do, and this makes a huge difference if your students taking SATs or AP tests, because after a certain point in time, they're going to start to peter out. They're running out of glucose, okay, and they're also not maybe breathing enough. They're just sitting there with their very shallow breathing. Okay. Now that's then how we get the carbon dioxide production. So oxygen doesn't just turn around to carbon dioxide. The lactate itself is not necessarily bad, and then we have lactic acid, which is produced by muscle damage. Okay. Now, the same thing to some extent happens in the brain as well, and it's now thought that sleep is extremely important to help to take care of these issues. And then last thing I'll just mention here is that for ketones, the problem with ketones is that although they maybe can be helpful in a number of things, and it was started a number of years ago, let's say 30 years ago, for the treatment of epilepsy and for autism, ketones themselves do destroy brain cells. Okay, so that's why for us in general, it's best not to be fasting for a very long period of time. That's why it's important to break our fast with an early morning meal of some sort. So I'm not trying to slam the ketogenic diet or anything like that, but we have to understand when it should be used and when it's otherwise detrimental. So we're highly functioning individuals. I think in general, it's best for us not to use the ketogenic diet because it is damaging to the brain.
Interesting.
Yeah. But otherwise, for other people, they actually may need it therapeutically. We can go to the next slide.
Does anybody have any questions online? Because I can't necessarily see under this screen if you guys are texting or have any questions. So please just use your voice if you want to interrupt with a question. Or I should say, feel free to use your voice. Ask questions. Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
thanks,
sure.
Charlie.
So going back to this biopsychosocial model, real quick, for the body, there's medical pathologies that can happen. For the brain, there are neurological disorders and some psychiatric disorders. But otherwise, most of the psychiatric disorders are tied in more with what we call the mind. And actually, in federal government, there is there's a great distinguishment between the two, particularly for research funding. So actually, during the time of George W. Bush and then Obama, the two of them signed for significant funding. One signed for significant funding for brain research, the other one signed for significant funding for mind research. Okay. We'll go into the next slide.
That's interesting because I see them as you have it here. They're intertwined.
Right.
But I can see how you can have a neurological disorder like Parkinson's
Yes,
And then you can have depression, which would be more in the psyche area,
absolutely.
but they're both.
But autism is where would that sit? That's it's kind of in the middle, right?
So it's a mix.
I think
Yeah.
they,
I mean,
all of them hit both, right? 'Cause
Right.
Parkinson has then the mind
But
part.
epilepsy is more of a neurological.
absolutely.
Yes.
Right,
right.
you're right.
Right. Absolutely.
So interesting, okay.
Yeah, so then in this, so these are just some examples here. Sorry, we can go on to the next slide. So previously I had done studying 3 different lab sets, the Center for Biological Evaluation and Research at the FDA, NOVA at the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease. And then I switched over to psychiatry and neurology when I saw that funding for infectious disease was being severely cut, and also when St. Vincent's Hospital in New York City was getting shut down. That was one of the biggest HIV research and clinics in the world. So I saw there wasn't much of a future for infectious disease. So I switched over and I spent a lot of time training in psychiatry and a little bit in neurology as well. But despite all that, we go down to the very bottom. Oh, maybe it's kind of cut off.
Yeah, I don't
Try to bring it a little bit. At the bottom, what I show is my main interests were in PTSD, depression, and success. And in part, the reason why I was interested in success was because I grew up in Pittsburgh, which was severely devastated in the 1970s and 80s financially. Westinghouse shut down, the steel industry shut down, the coal mining industry shut down, and over 200,000 jobs were lost. And many parents of my friends committed suicide because they're stuck in Pittsburgh. Nobody wanted to move in. Price of houses fell by like 4-fold. And so all these people were getting depressed. They found no way to improve things, and no federal or state or local programs helping bring back the jobs, as we saw some in Detroit and Cleveland. So I was just thinking that depression needs not only psychiatric treatment, but there also needs to be other considerations, social consideration, economic consideration. So that's how I started becoming more interested in coaching. So we can go to the next slide. Despite all my training at Dartmouth, Harvard, and Tufts, nobody mentioned Abraham Maslow or Martin Seligman. And these two guys were presidents of the American Psychological Association. Even in the American Psychological Association, these guys were really sidelined and really had to fight for the research funding that they wanted. And to try to get across the positive aspects of psychology to help people develop success. People might have heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think is very crucial. And Martin Seligman, actually, we go to the next slide, used to be heavily involved with cognitive behavioral therapy. So we see here Aaron Beck. He was a former psychoanalyst who developed cognitive behavioral therapy through a lot of research at the University of Pennsylvania. And his right-hand man was Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman was a psychologist and Aaron Beck was a psychiatrist. So Martin Seligman was actually the psychology training director for the psychology PhD program in CBT down there. If we go to the next slide, there was another guy in New York, similar to Aaron Beck, named Albert Ellis, who created something called rational motive behavioral therapy, REBT, which is basically the same thing as CBT. And both of them basically have this model that we have thoughts and we have emotions, and these can then, through decision, that's the arrow here, lead to behaviors. And a mix of, say, the thoughts and emotions is feelings. People generally refer to them, I feel this, I feel that. It's really a combination of thoughts and emotions which lead to behaviors. Now for the next slide, we can see that sometimes people's thoughts may be neutral, but their emotions may be negative and then lead to negative behaviors. Or their thoughts may be negative while their emotions are neutral, and that leads to negative behaviors. And then in the next slide.
How does that work?
So
I
for
can
instance,
see the first one.
yeah,
I'm angry. My emotion is flaring up and I have a behavior that's, that reacts to that. I can have a negative thought. I don't see how that's disconnected from an emotion.
sure. So
Like,
for
give
instance,
an
Your
example.
kids mess up,
Give an
right? Your
example.
kids. So the first one, you might be feeling crappy and you shout at your husband.
Right.
The second one is that your kids are playing and doing something bad, right? You're feeling in an emotionally neutral state, but your kids do something to upset you. Then therefore the action is the behavior.
Oh, I see.
right, so like,
But wouldn't that get me angry? I mean, they're doing it and
I
that
don't know, I
thought,
mean,
wouldn't that get me angry?
so for instance, we have a child who just has a perspective that's going against the social norm or the academic norm.
Mhm.
And or they just may be very selfish. So you see this with siblings. They may not have any emotion attached to something. I just wanted it. That's all it is. Okay, that's this kind of
So
scenario.
that would be actually, if you were to generalize, more like a teenage typical thing that you see in teenagers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Understood.
Excellent. So particularly if you have negative thoughts and negative emotions, which lead to negative behaviors or very growingly worsening intense feelings that are negative, then you can get worse and worse behaviors, go in this downward spiral. Okay, this downward spiral. Now we'll go to the next slide. And one point I'm trying to make here is that these thoughts and these emotions or these feelings, they are all modulated by neurons. Every thought, every emotion we have, it consists of thousands of neurons firing, sometimes millions of neurons firing. And the more thoughts and the more intense the emotions get, the far more neurons get involved. Now, so that's on the neurological side. Now, how does this relate to meditation and hypnosis? Well, actually, when we go through hypnosis and meditation, in general, our emotional centers start to turn off. I don't know if you guys have experienced that while doing meditation, but generally we don't necessarily feel all that much emotion. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Also in flow, if you study flow psychology, when you have these soccer players who are doing very well, they're just running around, and you ask them, well, how did you do so well? How did you Lionel Messi, how did you perform like that? And the soccer player may say, well, I don't know, I was kind of thinking, I was kind of conscious, but I was just kind of going in autopilot. How were your emotions? Some of them say, oh, I was really elated. Others will say, well, I didn't have any emotion. I was just going through the flow. Kind of like when we're driving down I-95 or Route 15. We've done it so many times, we can just do it automatically. There's not necessarily any emotion attached with it. So meditation and flow states can actually help control the emotions by toning them down or just turning them off completely. And sometimes the goal, both in Asia and Europe, of meditation is to tone down the emotions or shut them off completely, so that we can think and even maybe really turn off a lot of the unnecessary thoughts. Okay, so here we'll get to the next slide. There's a famous professor in neurology who has mentioned most of what the brain does is not conscious. Definitely what the brain's doing in general is not conscious. We'll go to the next slide. And that brings us over to Sigmund Freud, who said that, not only do we have a conscious mind that has thoughts and emotions, but we have a pre-conscious mind, kind of like what we call nowadays subconscious, thoughts and emotions that all of a sudden pop up at certain times. They may be triggered by something, or you're just sitting in class, you get bored, you start thinking about that guy or girl you're interested in, you start daydreaming about them. Okay, so your attraction to that boy or girl is deep down in your thoughts, and then they just pop up all of a sudden. Maybe you see another individual who looks like that guy, and you say, oh my gosh, that looks like Brad, and then you start focusing on your fantasy of Brad instead of what the teacher's saying. So that's this situation.
Or that song that just pops up in your head and it keeps going over for no reason, it just comes out of nowhere.
Absolutely. So then next slide. Freud said actually deeper than that, we have an unconscious mind. So we have 3 different layers of thoughts and emotions. And so his idea is, because there's all these people in Vienna who are very neurotic, they've got these weird ideas of things. His original teacher, who was like a neurologist, had a patient who fantasized that she was impregnated by him. So that guy and his wife apparently, Freud fled from Vienna because they're so frightened by the situation. And Freud's wondering, like, how did that happen? How did that girl have this fantasy when she does not seem to have a psychiatric disorder? She doesn't seem to have schizophrenia. So how could she fantasize such a weird way like that? So that got him on this quest to figure out what's going on in people's minds. Let's go to the next slide. And I'll show you how this ties into meditation. Okay, let's start this next. All right, so this right here is okay. So this right here is your brain, and deep down underneath, inside your brain, up here, this is the midbrain. Okay, that blue area. If we go to the next slide. So I'm trying to show you deep inside is that brainstem I was telling you about, okay, where we have hormonal control, automatic hormonal control. We're not aware of what's going on, but when we have, say for instance, when our thyroid gland has to be stimulated, when we have cortisol that's being released because we're getting anxious, okay, that's happening in this area here, the pituitary, hypothalamus.
Pituitary gland.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
It's deep down under here, deep down under here, close to where this optic chiasm is. The next slide, surrounding that midbrain and the hypothalamus is this area here inside this cavern I was mentioning, where the subcortex is. Okay, and many of our emotional centers are located there. Not all, some are located in our cerebral cortex, but most of them are in the subcortex. And the combination of the subcortex and brainstem is sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain or the animal brain, because reptiles and fish don't really have too much more development of the cortex beyond that subcortex and the brainstem. They have some, but not so much. So many of them don't even have a concept of a self. Let's go to the next slide. So for example here, all right, I don't think we have time for you guys to guess which animals these are, so I'll just move on to the next slide. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a shark brain. The shark brain is this brain stem here like this. Here's the midbrain. And then this area is the subcortical area. Okay, and then you've got a little bit of cerebrum here. That's the shark brain. The goose brain is kind of the same thing. With the horse, the mammal, then you start getting more development of the cortex. Okay.
Where's the part that does like self-preservation? So every creature doesn't want to die, right? So all the way down to a spider, you know, they run away. So where's that?
Actually, some of it's very reflexive in the midbrain and just below it. So for instance, for cats, if you stimulate the midbrain, there's a lateral part we call on the side, and then there's a part in the middle, the medial side. If you stimulate one side, the cat will arch its back, it'll go like this and the hair will stand up and it'll go. Okay, if you stimulate the other side, you'll have the arching the back, and instead of making any noise, the cat nips. It automatically does that. So it's actually, what?
It's automatic.
Yeah, it's actually automatically built in.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we humans have some of that automatically built in. But what makes us unfortunately a bit different is that as we all here, we have fights and flights, but we also have freeze. Okay, so when there's a serious problem going on, you'll see people getting up to fight. Some will be fleeing, but a lot of people freeze because of anxiety. And animals certainly do have anxiety. Many of them become depressed. There are dogs who take antidepressants. There's nothing wrong that they need it, so they need it. But we humans tend to get far more paralyzed by anxiety than animals do. Far, far more. So that's actually one big weakness we have, in addition to us not having physical capabilities that animals have.
So suicidal stuff happens.
Suicide actually happens more in the subcortical and in the cortex.
So it overrides the initial survival instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
You don't see all these animals committing suicide.
No.
Yeah. Even the whole idea about lemmings was a mistaken notion. But we have a very strong sense of self, but unfortunately, our sense of self gets torpedoed in terrible ways, especially in teenage years. As our sense of self is being compared to others, and we subjugate it to what other people seem to be thinking. Then you throw in social media and it just becomes worse and worse. So down at Johns Hopkins, there's a famous neurologist there who said, our view of the world is an illusion. Most of what we perceive of the world is constructed by the brain. Yet what we perceive is only a fraction of what is outside of our brain. So if we go to the next slide, with animals, they tend to have far better sight, far better hearing, and far better smell than we do. I mean, the shark, they can smell just little tiny bits of blood from any kind of animal and zoom in on that. So we humans lack that. So what we actually perceive is different than what animals perceive. Same actually, actually, even the way we see colors and hear sounds is different. So if you have a red ball, to a dog, it looks black. To us, we think red ball looks very obvious, but to a dog, it doesn't because it blends in more with the shadows. So that's why it's important not to use a red ball for the dog. We throw it and the dog's like going, it's not because the dog is dumb, it's because the dog can't see it, like we can't. Insects see different color palettes for flowers than we do. In fact, they can also see ultraviolet colors we can't see. And then we humans are different too. Men tend to have more restrictive colors that they can see and less smells that women can enjoy. And some women even have a little bit of ultraviolet capabilities that no one else has. So they see extra colors no one else sees, which is really fascinating.
Look at us.
Yeah, exactly, right. So that's why there's some guys who are just not fascinated by colors and smells because they're not detecting it. Yeah, this is actually a problem for guys who are colorblind, and so they can't necessarily see some of the colors that are in our presentations or in the books.
Explain some conversations when one is insistent that the color is not quite right, and the other one's like, I don't see a problem there.
Right, right. They don't, they don't understand, they can't perceive what you're talking about. In fact, okay, so what we perceive is constructed by the brain. What we see is actually flipped upside down, and our brain has to flip it right back up. So right now, your brain literally gets an image of me upside down, but it always flips it right back up. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
It was that experiment in the 70s. I remember the guy with the glasses, and then their brain eventually flipped it. And then when he took them off, they were inverted. You never saw that?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. Getting back to what this is all about. So I was starting to talk about consciousness in terms of us being able to have thoughts and emotions that we're aware of. And then from that, we make decisions. I mentioned a little bit about flow states and meditation. So now let's get to comparison contrast with them. So with the next slide, all right, in the realm of consciousness, we have two main networks of neurons that may be working in the brain. So that said, if this is the brain, okay, like this, and somebody's eyes are here and the nose is here, we have, when we're paying attention, like right now to a presentation or in class, or in some other meeting, our multiple demand network turns on, and there's multiple parts of the frontal lobe that are being used to help somebody to maintain attention to what's being discussed, to analyze the data that they're hearing and seeing, and then to try to solve certain types of problems. So the great thing about the multiple demand network that we have that far surpasses what animals have, is their ability to analyze and do problem solving. All right. And then of course, this is where computers are superseding us, but we still do have certain advantages they don't have. Now, when we start to daydream or the lecture is over and we just want to veg out in front of the TV or whatnot, then we have instead a default mode network, which turns on instead. Now that actually also involves many portions of the frontal cortex where most of our thinking is done. But it's in the default mode network where we can also start to instead use flow and creative problem solving. Now, I haven't mentioned yet how flow works. I'll get to that. So actually, if somebody is more artistic, they need creativity, or they need creative problem solving for rather difficult abstract problems, sometimes it's better to shift into a default mode network. And this is something I wish schools and universities would start to teach, is that sometimes you have to let people switch into a different mode. And there are some companies that allow their employees to just sit around and daydream or go and play games or something like that, or sleep. Because various aspects of certain types of sleep or playing around with Legos, whatever, really helps turn on creativity, whether it's an aesthetic, artistic creativity or problem solving creativity.
But autism, like with my son, he has a huge difficulty with that, the problem solving, but he's very rote, right? So everything is very concrete. They don't have imagination, or at least that's what I notice in the kids that I know. So it's more to the left than it is to the right.
Yeah, so it depends. Some actually can. So when there's some with autistic who come up with these really interesting abstract ways of understanding something.
Yeah.
Something in science or something or engineering or whatever. So they are using this part. It's just that it's difficult for us to realize when they're doing that. It's more difficult for them to directly what to do, but we have the ability to come in and say, okay, I'm just going from this mode to this mode and this mode back to this mode. So they certainly can do that. And that's why sometimes they just do amazing, incredible things.
Yeah.
Because actually, when they get into this mode, they can use it far more deeply than us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, that begs the question of how to make it conducive, right? For them.
Everyone's trying to figure that out, right? You'd be a very rich person if you could figure that out.
It's interesting.
Right.
It's a very interesting question.
and we used to be thinking of things in terms of right brain and left brain. Actually, a lot of it's not quite. There's some aspects to it that are true, but a lot of it's not necessarily. But it's really, we're thinking now, we've done over 1,000 studies on the default mode network, which I'm starting to talk about. And it seems like it's much more important to learn how to go back between this multiple demand network that we use for the most part at school and at work versus this DMN. And then to understand how either of them can be hijacked in certain ways. So the default mode network uses much of the cortex in a donut hole shape. I mean, in a donut shape. And the multiple demand network uses mainly this area here. Okay. And then sometimes if it's trying to sense certain things on the body and it's getting the body to respond physically, then this part of the brain will start working. This is where our motor cortex is. Now, this light blue area here covers a lot of our linguistic areas of the brain. So to understand language, context, and how then to respond to somebody. So actually, when the multiple demand network is working, it doesn't completely turn off the light blue areas. It's just that this is the area that's working most intensely. This is the area where executive functions, as we call them, are being used. Maintaining attention, analyzing data, retrieving memories, trying to solve problems, trying to create new memories. That's mainly going on here in this MDN area of the prefrontal brain. Any other questions about that?
Yes.
The DMN does not really involve subcortex very much. And that's in part why when we meditate, okay, most people do not feel heightening of emotion. In fact, whether they had some joy or glee or sadness or anxiety or anger, when they go into meditation, then subcortex is not used so much, so then their emotions all become more stable. Or sometimes they say just completely, emotions completely neutralized. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So default mode network is thought to be a network that's also used to start moving people into a sleep state, into your sleep. It doesn't always do that, but it can. And it's thought that if you teach people how to use more of this in a certain way to be able to let it happen, then it's easier for them to then fall asleep. The DMN is also used for daydreaming, for meditation, and for flow. Now, the way it operates is a bit different, and you do get different results. You get different experiences as well. Let me just switch quickly before you guys read more of this to the next slide. So in this next slide, I'm also trying to show relaxation and hypnosis as well. So that's let's go back up to the previous slide. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in daydreaming, you tend to have a creative imagination. You'd be fantasizing about some guy or girl you're in love with or something. But it's actually time when you can do some creative problem solving. And typically with daydreaming, you're thinking about the past or a future that you want. With meditation, you can think about the past, the present, or the future. And so you, instead of just relying upon a spontaneous creative imagination, which pops up from the subconscious, instead you use consciously guided visualization. When we meditate, we're still quite conscious. We're aware of various things, and we can control our thoughts. We can control what we want to think about, what we want to see while our eyes are closed. So we have this guided visualization. And through the process of this, we can recenter, we can organize the present material in the brain, and we can also do creative problem solving like in daydream. And then a flow state is really in which the neurons are firing neurons from our memory, from our past. It's a skillful memory recall, which I'll get into a little bit more pretty soon, and which can then provide us with a smooth performance. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie. I mean, I recently saw the movie Top Gun Maverick. You guys all seen that? Okay, so before they actually fly up to that crater and drop the bombs, kind of like in Star Wars mode, they spend time out in the desert in the United States practicing their runs. So, right, so they have a computer simulated model, but they're practicing their runs of how they're going to be turning and flying along the canyons of a canyon of a river. And then they practice going up in that steep ascent and then flipping upside down and going down into the crater and then coming right back up again. And they have to do this within a certain amount of time. So they practice until it starts becoming more automatic. Okay. Same thing kind of happens when we're trying to learn how to get from here to New York or Boston. We're learning, okay, maybe you can take Route 15, you can take Route 95, and then there's these other highways. And after a while, it starts becoming automatic. Okay. That is one main way of developing flow. Okay. So that finally you just have smooth performance. You can just fly through that river canyon rather automatically. In the meantime, you're keeping alert for any search to air missiles that might come and attack you, or enemy bandits, as they call them, other enemy planes. The whole point is that you can then spend your time just going through automatic pilot mode, looking out for the actual bigger dangers. Okay. Yeah.
This is similar to sort of, I mean, that's a very intense example, but daily routine, daily habits, it's flow related to that. And I mean, we all talk about routine is very important for our children when they're younger and growing, to have these habits to establish lifelong good habits. Is that falling under the category of flow?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Same thing when we're preparing to give a speech. So performing an instrument on stage. So we go, let's skip.
Question.
Yeah.
So when you talk about meditation, past, present, and future, I'm a little bit confused there because my understanding is that meditation is to stay in the present.
Right.
And mute or lower the volume on past or future. So how does it relate here?
Right. So when we do teach people, we try to have them focus on the presence.
Right.
Okay.
But there is meditation where you like visualize. So like you think,
Right,
how
when
do
you
you
do
want to be? How do you
visualization.
want to perform? You know, and you think
I see.
you set yourself.
Got it. That's it.
Or where did you come? How did you get to where you are today?
Okay.
So there is that as well.
Absolutely. So for instance, for some people who can't afford to have a piano, and they only have time to put their hands on the piano when they're, say, at school or at their teacher's place or maybe a friend's house. At home, they'll have just paper layout of the keyboard, and they will try to practice on that, which is a terrible way of learning how to play piano, but they're doing that. Or they're closing their eyes, they're trying to meditate while they're playing. So they have this guided visualization. And this is something that's particularly helpful, for instance, in tennis. There are quite a number of very famous female tennis players who have mentioned how they use guided visualization to imagine winning, for instance, at the US Open. In fact, in the past number of years, quite a number of athletes have mentioned that.
They did a great, that movie, where the girl plays chess, remind me please,
Gambit.
yes, she at night looks and visualizes the whole, so I see, I get it. And then with flow, I also understand that flow is when you get into a state of flow, that not necessarily is the routine, but it's when you get lost in so much pleasure of doing, you love painting or you love reading.
Right.
Right, and you lose track of time and it becomes a timeless kind of self-encapsulated moment, and then you're back into, and then your performance is smooth because you're immersed completely into it. So it's both of those.
Right. And typically at that time, you don't have these negative self-critical thoughts that would turn off your performance by literally inhibiting neurons. So when somebody's about to perform something, and before they go on stage, you think about all the different types of mistakes they might make, or what are people going to think of me? Okay, how do I look? So on and so forth. Those negative thoughts start to inhibit their performance neurons. It starts to make it difficult to recall what we had memorized for the content of a speech or for music written before. Also affects us with athletics. That's why one of the basic things that some athletes try to do is they try to use trash talk. Psychologically knock somebody down by turning on a lot of their inhibitory neurons. All right, yeah. So that's why it's important to train somebody how to ignore that, so they don't have any inhibitory neurons. Yeah, but when you're in flow, you really have very little that's inhibiting your performance. So that's why this is really important. There's this Ravi Khan who a couple of years ago won the US Open. She was playing, she's from England, but she's half Chinese and half Romanian. And she's fighting against a girl who's half South American and half Filipino. And she was talking about how she was using visualization. And just a couple of years before her, there's another Romanian girl who was also using visualization. So they said, both of them said basically they had imagined winning the US Open like more than 1,000 times. So be on court's very easy because they already imagined it. And their brain's already used to it, even though they never had a chance previously to be on.
Yeah.
All right. So this type of meditation can therefore help us with flow as well.
Which in lay terms can also be called as manifesting.
Yeah.
Got it.
We'll skip maybe the hypnosis part. So we get something more. So getting back to this, thoughts and emotions lead to behavior. And there's a reason why I'm mentioning that now. So let's go to the next slide. And that's because, for instance, if we want to experience flow state performance, what typically seems to be going on is that in our pre-conscious mind, so not our conscious mind, our pre-conscious mind, to have a flow state performance, we have memory recall. And that memory recall generally consists of thoughts. And these thoughts are like skills and knowledge, remember, of how to solve certain issues. And then there's also what we call our muscle memory as well. Emotions may or may not be involved from our memory recall, but this then leads to a nice, what we call flow state behaviors. So when we are in a flow state performance, it's actually usually using mainly the pre-conscious mind. It doesn't mean that our conscious mind is fully turned off. And so what I'm saying is we're using the default mode network, okay, but we can still have that other MDN network using in case we have problems. So for instance, if the pilots in Top Gun Maverick have already practiced flying through the canyon, they are using a memory recall, okay, and they practice a certain tempo of how they're doing things, and they have a certain rhythm as well for it. But then they're using their conscious mind to be on the alert for missiles and enemy planes, and then just try to decide at that time how they're going to avert the missiles and enemy planes. But even then, they've practiced all kinds of maneuvers to avoid enemy planes when they're being shot at with machine guns or missiles or whatever. So there's different aspects to that which they've been training for. They've been building up pre-consciously how to do this. And if you notice, Tom Cruise says twice to a guy named Rooster, stop thinking, just do it. Now we shouldn't be using that principle all the time, but that works if we have been practicing. When you finally get to performance mode, just stop thinking and do according to the memory that recall that you have. But if there's any problems along the way, then you just make your adjustments. Okay. Now, so there's performance, but before we get to performance, let's go to the next slide. Before performance, there is rehearsal. There's rehearsal. Here I refer to it as visualization. There's rehearsal, but before the rehearsal, really there's the practice. So we consciously practice various things in general. So when we're in school, when we're in athletic training, we're consciously practicing physically and mentally, and sometimes emotionally, various things. And then if we want to be able to use it to then create a flow state memory, we need to get this into our pre-conscious mind and memorize the positive way we did it. And it's best to do this as we're going to sleep. So I mean, to recall, say, the positive practice session that you had. Try not to remember any of the negatives. Any negative is any problem you have in practice, just something that's being improved. Don't think of it as a failure or a problem. But you go to bed thinking about what was positive about your practice or what you learned. So whether it's calculus, whatever, go to bed thinking about the great things you learned about it. And that'll go into your memory far better. It's easier to recall later on. We now know that actually memory formation is really far more solidified when we're sleeping. With every cycle of sleep, if your sleep is not being bothered by anxiety, every cycle of sleep, our neurons reactivate what it was learning during the day. And the more we consciously try to do as we go to sleep, the better it is. Okay, so we can vastly improve our memory and memory recall by consciously trying to think about the positive things we did during the day or learned during the day. Any questions about that? Some of that research actually is from Yale. One particular psychiatrist that did research on that. Now, once we have the memory of it, then we need to practice a rehearsal of it. So we pull out the thoughts and emotions, and then we let ourselves then really pop these thoughts and emotions up into our conscious mind. So this is not quite the flow state yet in a sense, but we start to rehearse the flow behaviors. Okay, so we let what was subconscious in our mind, what was positive, pop up, which is kind of the exact opposite of what Freud was talking about. Freud was talking about how people who are very neurotic and depressed, they have all these negative thoughts which pop up.
And they can't handle it.
But whereas here, I'm talking about the positive thoughts which they can pop up in the subconscious mind. And that's what's made me so tied in part about cognitive psychology and other aspects of performance psychology. Because the mental health thing never talks about this.
So fascinating.
Yeah, so, actually, this slide, let's go back. Yeah, so, at this point, you guys have any questions?
No.
Pretty almost 11 o'clock.
You're spot on.
Yeah, I think it's better not to complicate things than last slide. That'll take too long.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, so, really what makes hypnosis a bit different is that with hypnosis, well, maybe I should mention how I got into it. I was not initially interested in hypnosis myself. I was skeptical. But what happened is over at Tufts at the time.
Can I put you now in an image?
Oh, yeah, sure,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to go. This is fascinating. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. There was a seminar given, actually not by psychologists, psychiatrists, but by some dentists and a cardiologist over at Tufts School of Medicine. Because particularly at Tufts Dental, they were using hypnosis for their dental patients. And there was this cardiologist named Stephen Parker, who was our main teacher. He's a guy who has cerebral palsy. The type of cerebral palsy, he has a dysarthria. Yeah, so I could only just understand maybe half or sometimes just 1/3 of what he was saying. And yet he was able to hypnotize me. And when he hypnotized me, he had me hold some things through my hypnosis. And I was holding them for a long period of time and I felt no weight whatsoever. I kept this going on for like half an hour. And I opened my eyes during it and I saw that I was doing it. It was just amazing. So they then started explaining what they knew at the time neurologically was happening. And then I started getting interested in it. So they were using it clinically to help patients relax in dentistry. To some extent, it was being used by the surgeons also at Tufts. And they found that people then were far more calm during the procedures, had far fewer changes in their vital signs, and they had far better outcomes after surgery or dentistry in those situations. So at the New England School of Clinical Hypnosis, they taught us how to do self-hypnosis. And so when I had my patients, I was teaching them how to hypnotize themselves so that initially they're being guided by somebody else. So in meditation, somebody may be prompting you, but they're not actually guiding you through it. But in hypnosis, somebody is guiding you through it. They're leading you through it. And in a sense, you're letting them to control you and they're giving you various suggestions. And it's book here now. It's difficult to see because the print's kind of messed up, but it says hypnotic suggestions and metaphors. So this is a book full of suggestions that can be used in hypnosis and therapeutic hypnosis. So somebody has to be suggestible. If they don't believe in hypnosis or they're afraid whether hypnosis is not going to work. Now, I'm not talking about the type of mass hypnosis or hypnosis where you're trying to take over somebody. Those are similar processes that are, of course, quite problematic in certain ways. But otherwise, for myself, I only practice this very simple type of self-hypnosis with patients. Because when people go through hypnosis, there are certain what we call ad reactions, kind of these bad reactions that can happen, especially if they've been traumatized or they have a psychotic disorder, they have problems with hallucinations and delusions. So really the only type of people generally should be practitioners who should be providing a deeper hypnosis should be a psychologist or psychiatrist who has gone through 4 years of psychoanalytic training, at least 4 years, after their doctorate, so at least 4 years of intense psychoanalytic training, which is not what they experience in residency or fellowship programs. And then to have training in addition to that in psychoanalytic hypnosis. It's very difficult to find people like that. And there's only certain disorders you actually don't use it for. So you might have heard of it being used for instance, borderline personality disorder and multiple personality disorder. And there's a number of movies actually which you try to portray somebody who has multiple personality disorder and the psychiatrist or the psychologist who's trying to bring those multiple identities together. So somebody just becomes one identity, one personality. But stuff like that is very, very tricky. And that's why I'm trying to tell people to be careful about hypnosis. Freud himself found hypnosis wasn't very helpful early on in his investigations. And so I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you got to be very aware. There's a lot of people who claim they can hypnotize you, they're going to do all these great things for you. I even have a family member who is doing stuff like that. But you got to be careful. There are side effects you can have from that. There are adverse reactions. And it's not necessarily mean that they're really helping anything in particular. You seem like it. So I'm also trying to say it's very important if you have any kind of mental disorder or somebody in your family has it. I'm not trying to ask people to just do meditation or get into self-hypnosis. You still need to get diagnosed by a clinician, whether it's a psychologist or psychiatrist or a doctor, and then you need to have treatment options, whether it's psychotherapy or medication or something else.
That's great.
Thank you.
Sure.
So much.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Literally,
On the top.
yes, this is so interesting. Thank you very much.
Can I see that? You had a book that was on flow and sports.
Oh,
I
yes.
want to take a picture of that
Yeah,
one.
and I'm gonna write them all down in the newsletter
okay,
too,
good.
but yeah.
Are they both sport related or just
One-
this
one
one?
of
This is just
Yeah.
one, yeah. This is the one.
Okay.
Now, they're both rather old, just so you know, there's most of that's since then, that's been developed since then.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we can still.
Stick with the brain and the presentation. Sorry.
Yeah.
It would be great if you could hang on, we'll take a few pictures.
Oh, sure.
Before,
Yeah, fine.
right after we wrap up.
Mhm.
So, well, thank you again, Andrew.
Yeah.
We Really appreciate it. Thank you for everybody who zoomed in, or those of you who may be watching it after. Thanks for coming to the March 31st meeting of March. Just two quick reminders again, the next meeting available for all PTO members is our April 18th long range planning meeting, which is hosted and coordinated by our VP Jawad Masters. And so if you have anything you want to add to the list of topics to discuss for long range, please feel free to email Jawad. And her email address is in the directory if you don't have it. That again will be here April 18th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Following that, there was a date change for the May 12th meeting, which is our last meeting where we'll officially be conducting business for this calendar year. And that's Friday, May the 12th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. as usual on Zoom and here at the Boston High School Library. And that concludes our meeting for today. And I wish you all a wonderful week and a very enjoyable April break at the end of next week. No school on Friday. For anybody who's wondering, April break begins that morning, no school. So have a great day and thanks again.